in their children's lunch kits every day now. Teachers need to be in the classrooms happy and prepared to teach now. Pregnant mothers who are giving birth need to give birth to live babies now, not when all comes. And so I'm very concerned about the laissez-faire. A budget has to be done, so let's draft one, let's skin our teeth, let's read it, and push it through because we have this one-seat majority. And that, for me, is the biggest complaint I have about the budget. It seems directionless. It doesn't even build on things that happened last year or the year before. And it certainly does not plan for, it tells us about where we should be in 2020 and 2021. It completely skips 2019. And the reality is that every single Guyanese citizen has to live through 2019 daily. We have to feed ourselves, we have to go to school, we have to get shelter, pay rent, all that in 2019. And this budget seems to be just one that will allow the government to speak about first oil and when oil comes.
Okay. Do you want to speak about the education sector? $52.2 billion was set aside for this. Do you think this is adequate to improve the education standard in Guyana?
Well, I would say because, and I'm saying this speaking from a position of being in the ministry, the education ministry for 3 years, we'll never get adequate. So no minister is ever going to get all that they want. But you have to prioritize. What is it the ministry wants? This is the first time. When the PPP came into office in 1992, the World Bank did some studies on the country. And they did a particularly in-depth, very detailed study on the education sector. They looked at everything from staffing to buildings to infrastructure to textbooks to students to so they looked at everything. And one of the first things they said Guyana needed to do was to have a sectoral plan, an education sectoral 5-year development plan, so that everybody in the ministry knows what we're working towards and how to get there. Ministry is a huge ministry. It has 10,000 teachers. Its employment alone is about 30,000 people. And then we're talking about 180-something thousand students. So you really need to have, a very, very clear framework to work with. And every single year from 1994 to when we left office, the education ministry, the Ministry of Education of Guyana, had a 5-year plan. This is the first time in the history of this last 20-something years that the education ministry is functioning without a plan. The government has failed to adopt a plan, has failed to craft a plan. The wise and very dedicated officers of the Ministry of Education are working with continuing the work the PPP started, so that you didn't see a collapse. You never really see a collapse. You see it in the grades. But there is no plan. There is no sectoral plan. What we heard is, we can't give you a plan. We have to do this commission of inquiry, the COI. Remember the big COI that cost us a lot of money? And after that, we'll do it. Up to today, we have not seen the results of the commission of inquiry. Joseph Harmon, 3 years ago, promised from the floor of the National Assembly that COI would be laid in the National Assembly soon. Up to today, we haven't seen it. The Ministry of Education, the people there don't know what is in it, but we've paid for it, and we're waiting on it. The Education Bill, it's over 100 years old. The Education Act. We had laid, before we came out of office, a bill in the National Assembly. Okay, new government, you've been given a mandate. I get that you might want to look at that bill and see if you want to make some changes. The bill was consulted heavily across Guyana. So, it wasn't a pre-Omanic Chan bill. It was what the people of Guyana wanted in that piece of legislation. But 3 years and we can't get a bill back laid in the House. So $50 billion sounds like a lot of money. And indeed, it is a lot of money. But if there is no plan, we don't know how it will be spent, then it could just be $50 billion wasted. And we have actually seen that. Recently, the Kaieteur News, I believe, came out with a report that spoke of a book racket at the Ministry of Education, where they said very clearly that books were not supplied. Book suppliers were not qualified to supply books. And they were quoting from the Auditor General's report, by the way. They couldn't determine whether the ministry had received $91.6 million worth of books. The correctness of payments worth $247 million could not be verified. No contracts for books amounting to over $276 million. In one case, the ministry ordered 30,000 Animal Friends for parents. You know, that's a book for our nursery babies, our grade 1 children. They ordered 30,000 at $64.15 per book. They ended up paying double, $128 per book. We don't know who they paid it to. They're ordering exercise books from overseas when for far more, when you could get it cheaper for people in Ghana who have, from providers in Ghana who have invested in machinery and equipment to provide those books. Now, that's a long report the Auditor General did, not Priya Manik Chan. The Auditor General did that. And I was very disappointed because we're talking about big fat numbers and books and so on. What does it mean? If the books were not supplied, it means the children in the classroom can't get those books. And if they can't get the books, they can't learn from the books. And if they can't learn from the books, they can't compete with our Caribbean counterparts their age so that we can do as well as we have been doing. What it means is we're shortchanging our Guyanese children. And so if you can't spend in the ministry, if you can't manage the ministry, if you can't deliver services to the ministry, it is our people that will suffer. And we have seen that across the country. You saw teachers had to go and march and make up songs and beat a drum and carry a pressure pot and so on before they could get something they had become accustomed to for 12 years prior to that. A salary negotiated, mutually negotiated salary increase. And because of that, you see on the Global Human Capital Report. What is this report? This is a report that across the world measures how countries invest in their human beings, the people, the children, the mothers, the fathers. How are we doing in that report? And you see very clearly that we have slipped significantly. In between 2015 and 2017, we have come down 7 places for the quality of education. So as soon as this government went in, I mean, the PPP, every year there were incremental increases in how well we did. Sometimes you had big jumps, sometimes you had a 0.5, whatever, but we were growing in how we did. As soon as this government came in, confusion started reigning. We slipped 7 places in the quality of education we're providing to our children who are between 0 and 15. So this is from nursery to CXE. We have slipped 7 places in the kind of education services. I didn't say so. The PPP didn't say so. The Global Human Capital Index report says so. We have slipped 9 places in the literacy rate for our young people aged 15 to 24. That same report says that. We have slipped 4 places for employment. So I mean, when we're unable to spend this money, and we don't have a plan about how we're going to spend it, it means nothing in terms of improving our people's lives. A budget is supposed to come and speak to how Guyana, John, Mary, Bagwati, Priya, Joe, Samuel, this is how your life will get better because of this budget. And 2019 budget fails to tell us that. It speaks about a lot of numbers, it talks about a lot of fluff, it speaks about a lot of hope, but we can't put hope on our plate and eat it. Or we can't put hope in our classroom and put it in our children's brain. That is not going to satisfy us reaching benchmarks that we need to reach if we're going to be competitive in the Caribbean, in the world, and if we're going to serve our people.
All right. Mr. Hamilton, I'm sure you've heard of the concerns from various sections and quarters of society, particularly the man in the street. What are your thoughts of Budget 2019?
The 3 things we look at quickly here. One, you have a budget that is $300 billion. Big number. But the $300 billion means nothing. And we have had 2017 $230 billion. At least 10 billion of that went back to the consolidated fund. Wasn't utilized. We have had a budget of $250 billion in 2018. We're still waiting for the numbers, at least I think, but $20 billion of that money will go back to the consolidated fund. Because at the level of the agencies, the public sector improvement program is faltering across the sector. And so you have $300 billion. We read it at the end of this November. By end of 2019, I can assure you about $50 billion of that money will go back to the consolidated fund. Because if you look across the system, you will see what is happening in all the agencies. I can point you to projects that are there since 2016 to be completed in the public, the infrastructure ministry. They have a budget now about $50 billion given to them. But the fact is they have projects that they are 2016 projects that should have completed in 2016, and we are now at 2018 going to 2019, and those projects are still there to be done. The Sherry Street project is one of those projects that is beyond time by months. In the ministry compound itself, they started to build a new building there. It's in 2016. You go there, it is still there being built. That is a building that was a 2016 project. Ministry of Health, you go there, a project that should have been completed now, the man is now driving the piles. So the money budgeted, Ministry of Health, they were to build a new lab for the food and drug. That is yet to be tendered. So by the hundreds of millions of dollars, across the sector, you add that up, this $300 billion, about $50 billion of that money will go back to the consolidated. What it means, as indicated by my colleague, is that the people will not get the necessary services. That is what it means. So to, the budget is 300, it means nothing if the ordinary man is not getting service. And that is what has been happening over the period. The second issue, as identified by the Auditor General, is the corruption and the ineptitude and incompetence and fraud that is taking place within the system. So you might spend money, but the fact is whether you're getting value for money, it's another question. So you spend $50 million on a project, but the project really cost $25 million. So $25 million went into corruption and fraud and all the squandermania and that kind of. So you have those two major deficiencies that has been identified by the minister himself. But the fact is, when you look, there is no remedy. He hasn't spoken to how the government will address those two deficiencies that are fundamental to the delivery of service to the people. Third point is there are some minimal measures that will affect business. But the most important issue you talk to all the people involved in business is the issue of stable, reliable, and cheap power. You cannot talk about industry and manufacturing in a vacuum unless you have cheap power to deliver. Our people cannot compete. And that's the reason why you have a man can bottle a bottle of water in Suriname and he brings it to Guyana and it sells cheaper than the water we bottling in this country. The same thing with the sweet drink, and we could go into all the things. You know, that is so because they are able to manufacture at a cheaper price because the power generation is stable, one, and secondly, they pay a cheap rate for power. And so the government threw aside Amalia, but you know, my grandmother used to always say, if you take away bread, you at least got to put biscuit on the table. And so we are here 3 years hence, and the government is yet to define how we will deal with the issue of power supply and generation in this country. They've gone to Islamic Bank after apparently the IDB must say no more money we will give you. Now we will take money from Islamic Bank to deal with GPL. The issue is GPL has outlived its usefulness. The fact is you have to find some, and that's the reason why the PPP sought to develop the Amila project. They have thrown it aside, but they have brought nothing to deal with this issue. So the issue of manufacturing, the issue of industry, the issue of where the minister talking about plantation agriculture, all of those things are just pie in the sky gaff, because unless you have power generation that is cheap, that is stable, that is reliable, the business sector would not be able to perform the way they perform. The other issue is they talk about, I see the 535 jobs the Ministry of Business via Go Invest brought to the country. I mean, once you do that, you send home 10,000 people in one sector.
30, actually. 30,000.
You know, you said the sugar sector is decimated. The fisheries sector, people have gone home by the hundreds. The forestry sector, people have gone home by the hundred. The mining sector. So to talk about 535 jobs, it's nonsensical. You shouldn't even put that in. And the thing is, when the budget debate comes next week, we will ask the minister, Gaskin, and where are the jobs? That has always been a mystery. So there's a number, but they cannot tell you, okay, 16 fisheries, 15 agriculture. They cannot. So it's just numbers that are in the budget. And the other issue is, many of the things the minister got in this, but he has said it in 2017, 2016, 2018. The road to Goshen and the road, Goshen apparently crossing the Jordan River now. It's not this one, the road to Goshen, the Lethem Road to Mabura, the Kurupukari Bridge. I see they have dropped out the, they had a big pet project to do what they call boardwalks. I note that has dropped off the Pie in the Sky Talk project. They were to develop a boardwalk along the Kingston Seawall, along the Demerara River, and we would have gone there and have good sport and enjoy life. The fact is, it is just gaff. And so you have 99 pages of 4 hours of gaff. That is what it was. And as my colleague has said, it is not pointing the country to a place. And that's what a budget must do. It must point the populace to a place in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, in the next 15 years. And this budget has failed miserably to do that.
And it's not only, I get a sense that they're not living in a reality. And that's why my thing is, it's the context of the realities of Guyana. The minister stood up and read very happily that U.S. is selling for 208 for one. Nobody in this country could buy U.S. for 208 Guyana dollars for $1 US. It's 270. In fact, while he was on the floor, I broke a rule of the parliament and I made a call to Cambio and I said, how much you selling U.S. for? 217 that day on the 26th. He'll want to say, well, I was using Bank of Guyana figures, and we always use Bank of Guyana figures. But the Bank of Guyana figures have never been so far removed from reality, from what's actually on the road, in the streets, on the cambios, as they are presently. So he says that, and he believes that, and he runs the country as though it's 208 for one. It's not. The whole of Guyana knows that. Then he says something ridiculous like, we're going to, we have these young people, and they're so excited about using drones to seed your fields. Farmers to seed their fields. For the rice farmers, that means to shy paddy. You're going to use drones to shy paddy? The rice farmers don't want to hear about that. That's not to say they don't know what a drone is. Many of them have drones and fancy machinery and homes, but they want to hear about dams that could bring their paddy out. They want to hear how those dams are going to be repaired and maintained. They want to hear about lower MMA fees. They want to hear about taxes off tractors and combines and machinery that they have to use. They want to hear about duty-free diesel. They want to hear about, you want to talk about innovations and encouraging young people to do things. Let's talk about varieties of paddy that are insect repellent or that are insect resistant or that can stand up to the new climate realities we have in Ghana. That's how you can encourage young people. Don't these dreams that you speak about expanding legal aid this year. Well, in the last year budget, you cut the legal aid. Legal aid is to give people access to these fancy courts. We have poor people, particularly women and children. They cut that budget because they said they were going to bring on a children's legal aid. It's November. It's the end of November, and that children's legal aid has not started as yet. And this year, you say, oh, we're going to expand legal aid services. You speak about these things and they sound sexy, but this government, to me, is not basing their propositions and their vision, if they have any, for this country in the realities that currently exist. And that is a big problem. If you are running the country in a way that you should be running it, if it's 208 Guyana dollars for $1 US, then you're living in a different land. You live in a completely different land. And you will not be able to run the country sensibly because you're running it in a way that is so far removed from what the reality is. And that is a huge problem for the country. The corruption that Joe spoke about earlier. Look at that bond. The bond is a house of PNC Financial, a house that he rented. They rented. They're storing no drugs there. They're storing condoms, I understand. I don't know if they're still storing condoms there. They might be storing nothing by now. They know it is overpriced. We're paying $14 million a month. We've spent in excess of $300 million already on that bond in a country that has said we don't have money. They said we don't have the kind of money we need to have. Yet they refuse to end this contract. And so the corruption is heavy. We have seen the Harbor Bridge issue where all of a sudden people bid to do a feasibility study. All those were thrown out. And all of a sudden somebody came unsolicited and he was given the contract. The textbooks issue, they're asking people who are not qualified suppliers to supply textbooks. They're buying exercise books that we give to our children at a far higher cost from probably friends overseas. The drug HDM labs is supposed to supply drugs because it's an emergency. Those drugs never came until 6 months later. They were supposed to come in 2 weeks. We paid more than $100 million than we would have paid if we had bought them from the known drug suppliers in Guyana. And so the budget is, a budget is not a routine thing. A budget is supposed to tell us where we are, tell us where we want to be, and present to us policies and programs that will take us closer to the place where more Guyanese could enjoy services equitably. And just last night, I understand, Demerara News report said that the chairman of the PNCR, Valda Lawrence, who is also a minister of the government, the Minister of Health, said very clearly that she is only prepared to give PNC people jobs. So we're kind of going back to the place where you got to have a party card before you can enjoy the benefits of state. So instead of the equitable distribution of services that I spoke about, equitable distribution of the enjoyment of goods, equitable distribution of the usage of skills of Guyanese, because it's not only PNC people that have skills. You have people who don't affiliate with any party. You have PPP people that have skills. You have URP people that have skills. But she said very clearly and unapologetically, they're there only for PNC people, and that's how she intends to hire. And that, for me, just tells us where we are. We have really regressed as a country, and the budget does not offer us any promises about going forward.
All right, thank you very much for being here. We were joined by former Minister of Education, Priya Manik-Chan, and Opposition Member of Parliament, Joseph Hamilton, as well. Thank you for joining us. We were examining Budget 2019. Goodbye for now.
Thank you.